So can I now request Anand Chandrasekaran to speak? He is based in the Bay Area. He has moved to Chennai to start his development operation. His operation is all about innovation, and I'm sure he has something very interesting to talk.
Hi, hi. I'm Anand Chandrasekaran, and I'm the CTO and founder of a startup, an artificial intelligence startup based out of Chennai. I'd like to tell you a little bit more about myself. Okay, and this is not to really tell you about myself. It's actually a commentary on our educational system. So I started out at IIT Madras. Okay, I'm only going to talk after school, right? So I've been in academia for 13 years, okay, including my undergrad at IIT Madras. And I started out, you know, being this bright student, a 9-pointer in my first semester, 9-pointer, 8, 7, and I failed a course in my 5th year. Okay, that's my spiral down. And the reason this happened was there was nothing in there for me. The educational system failed me. IIT Madras failed me. I was not happy with what I was doing. I didn't know what I had to do. And having said that, the solution is not outside this country. The thing that inspired me and got me back up was actually another Indian institution, the National Center for Biological Sciences. This is in Bangalore. So I went and attended a workshop on computational neuroscience and realistic brain modeling. So there's this wonderful professor over there, Upinder Balla, and I fell in love with the subject. And it wasn't just the subject that I fell in love with, it was the way the research was conducted. Okay? So this doesn't have to happen anywhere else in the world. It happened right here in India, and it kickstarted my career in academia. Unfortunately, I didn't stay in India to complete that because the path that I took is still not available over here. So I did my PhD in neuroscience. I left electrical engineering for a little bit. I did my PhD in neuroscience, and then I went to Stanford and did my postdoc in a field called neuromorphic engineering. Okay, so I was building custom silicon to emulate the brain. That's kind of the kind of stuff I was doing over there. So the point I'm trying to make, and it kind of echoes Krishna Kumar's point as well, is scientists. Where are we going to get them? How are you going to inspire Indians to be scientists? And unfortunately, it's not really happening. And it's not happening because we need to be putting a lot more money into fundamental research over here. We can't keep pointing to IISc, and now I'm pointing to NCBS, as one of our few institutes where I actually felt like that was happening. And this has to happen all over the place. And so that's definitely something that needs to happen. So as a person, so I'll switch now to talk a little bit more about my field and where I see things happening and how that's relevant to India. I've been lucky enough to be at the cutting edge of technology, working on things that are not yet even useful. And I hope I've contributed a little bit. In fact, I think Mahesh earlier was talking about how hardware is becoming more configurable. Part of my postdoc was about building neuromorphic hardware. And one of the chips I designed was a chip that could rewire itself to mimic how your brain wires itself. So I've been pretty lucky with that. And so I'll share a few of my perspectives about where the field of artificial intelligence and computer vision and things like that are going, and use that to tie it into the Indian condition. So everybody has probably seen this picture. It's one of Google's driverless cars. And the point I would like to raise over here is not that we build driverless cars, because if we build a driverless car in India, it will probably fail. And the reason it's going to fail is because our cities suck. We don't have the infrastructure. That driverless car, which has probably, what, 11 accidents or something reported over there, do you think that's going to happen over here? You'll be running into cows and dogs and every other cyclist and auto rickshaw every other day. It's not going to happen. So what we actually need to be investing is not technology like the driverless cars, which are slightly irrelevant to us. What we need to be investing is in improving our cities. So that's why we need to be looking into the future. So many people, Anand and Anand Pillai from earlier in the morning, were talking about the Internet of Things, connected components, smart cities. It's a wealth of data that's going to be coming out. And these are the things that we need to be innovating on. So everybody's been talking about this, and I'm going to emphasize it again. Data. Everybody needs to be focusing on the data that's coming out of this, this space. In fact, there's a popular term for IoT. It's not the Internet of Things, it's the intelligence of things. What you do with this data, the kind of analysis you do, and how you feed that back into the system to innovate at the levels of the city. Smart cities are not going to happen overnight. They're going to happen when you take all of this data and feed it into something that can actually come up with the inferences needed. I'd like to point out a particularly innovative company I met the CEO of last week. It's a company called Improbable Technologies Limited, I think, or Improbable Worlds. The point is they are conducting simulations on the cloud that run into billions of entities. So these are the kind of simulations that could drive innovation. So some of the things, to directly translate into how that can be useful, you can probably simulate the entire power grid of a city and figure out how that can actually be used to improve the condition of the Indian cities. And so it's realistic. Road signals. Anybody who's been in Bangalore knows how horrible commutes are over there. We are losing productivity because people are spending 2 hours in commutes. Okay? Well, there's a lot of data out there. Why aren't those traffic lights connected to something smart? There's a lot of data that can actually analyze those traffic patterns and give something back to the city, improving on all of that infrastructure. That's what we need to focus on, and this is the common thing I'm hopefully going to be coming down to, is that we need to leapfrog things. We don't need to invent what other people are inventing. We don't need a smart car, but we can leapfrog it to a day when smart cars are possible in India by focusing on the next piece that has to come before this can be useful. Okay, so similar theme, healthcare. So what you're seeing over here is the Da Vinci surgical robot sold by a company called Intuitive Surgical. Okay, now this is a wonderful piece of equipment. It's ridiculously expensive, but it cuts down surgery times, recovery times by making minimally invasive surgeries possible. And I think Japan, US, they all buy Da Vinci systems. I don't see Indians affording this. The surgery that's done by such a system, it's not going to be affordable for the average Indian human. So this is why actually, so things like BIRAC are probably going to be wonderful things. I really applaud them for what they're trying to do. I sadly was not aware of all of their efforts, so I'm a little bit enlightened today. So we need to be investing in healthcare, not necessarily in this kind of cutting edge technology, but all of the things that were mentioned in the kind of things that BIRAC is supporting. So we need to be talking about telemedicine, things that amplify the number of, amplify the effect of our doctors on the system out there. We have far too doctors to deal with the number of Indians we have, right? So that's the kind of stuff we need to do. Again, leapfrog stuff, don't copy. Education is the one space actually we can copy because the kind of technology available over here, so what I've shown over here is a little bit of augmented reality. So you can take a tablet or a phone and use that to transform the daily objects that people interact with. And this is particularly important with our children because they are getting scary smart thanks to all of these devices. So my daughter at the age of 2 was using an iPad the way my parents can never do, okay? And this is going to always be true. They are going to be so scary. So I think it was Saravanan who was talking about his son fixing his car out of watching a YouTube video, and that's going to happen all the time. And so, not condoning child labor, that's not what I'm trying to say, but we do need to be looking at our children for sources of innovation, because they are living with these devices today. We did not. This is artificial to us. It isn't to them. And so we need to figure out a way to tap into their creativity, somehow maybe even making it into schools to find as a source of, and schools, I mean, you know, middle schools and high schools, not colleges, even tap into them to try and get ideas out of that. So we need to explore that. Okay, this might be familiar. Elon Musk and SpaceX trying to launch reusable first stages of space rockets. So the Indian space research is going wonderfully, right? We did wonderful things, and we're doing it with what is available. We're doing it for a lot cheaper. We need to continue doing that. But again, a slight caution, we shouldn't copy. We need to be leapfrogging. So just because a neighboring country is putting people in spaceships and taking them to space does not mean we necessarily have to invest in doing something like that. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do, but there are things that you can do to leapfrog this. And actually, that's kind of related to the next topic as well. Why aren't we sending robots into space? There is no reason to invest in humans going into space just yet. So these are things that can come into the future. And if this sounds so far-fetched and not relevant to India, well, think about how resource-starved the world is. You want to go mine asteroid belts in space, you could do that, but you can't send humans to do that. Again, if you're investing in our space research, do so by leapfrogging technology. You don't have to follow and do everything along the path that another country has done. Just jump ahead and build what is needed for us today. And that way you get India ahead of the curve. So, yeah, right. And one other point, this is kind of important. As robots are making their way into the world, this is actually Pepper. It's a SoftBank funded robot. Just wanted to point out, the stats for how many Mi 4s or something was sold in one day are going to start paling when you think about the fact that 1,000 Peppers were sold in under a minute in Japan. Or I think it was in Japan. But robots are coming. How do robots come to India? And what do robots tell us about ourselves? We need to be thinking about those things. The point I'm trying to make here is there are a lot of things that are being considered in the rest of the world, like robots are probably going to take away our jobs. It's not likely going to happen in India. But robots are going to become a part of our lives. We need to figure out how we integrate them into our lives to benefit the Indian condition. And that's, again, where we need to innovate, figure out the right context in which we build this kind of technology, given that we'll have the capability to do so. So I'll summarize. Okay, actually, I'm going to skip over a lot of points. I just wanted to summarize a few important things. Everybody's been talking about our educational system and what is needed out of it and what you guys can help us do. I'll focus on two major things. One of them is that training has to be more exploratory. And this is similar to what a lot of speakers have spoken about. In fact, Krishna Kumar was talking about how we get people interested in research. How do we get people to do fundamental and foundational work? Well, that's going to happen only if you interest them in those fundamentals. I revert back to my stay at IIT Madras. I was not interested in what I was learning. I was just looking for the day I would leave. And I see that echoed in today's colleges. Yes, I'm a lot older, and the kids today have a lot of access to a lot more information. They're all into the whole startup scene. Wonderful, right? They're not paying attention to what's actually happening at college. They're just looking for the day they can start their own company, and they're not looking inside the college to see how they're going to start that company. And the result of that is actually a whole bunch of copycats. They just copy what happens in the Western world. They're not actually thinking about building foundational companies. And the only way that's going to happen is by them focusing on the fundamentals and foundational stuff that happens in school. So you have to be more engaging. You have to get them to innovate from within the schools. The startups coming out of colleges have to be grounded in foundationals. That's the only way we're going to, again, leapfrog the world as opposed to building copycat companies. Every startup out there that's big in India, you know that there's an equivalent in the US. You can draw a straight line pointing out to exactly which company they copied. Yes, that's relevant, but we need to move beyond that, right? And a note back to the industry friends. Well, I don't know whether I can call you friends yet because I'm a small startup, but this is a note to the industry folk over here. One of the things, and this again addresses one of your issues, is that we need to have the same kind of culture, and this is something we should copy from the West, of having innovation centers in the form of labs like the Bell Labs, Xerox PARC, IBM Labs, whose purpose is not necessarily directly in making money for the parent company, but can serve as centers of innovation where the research can actually transcend what is needed immediately to make money, basically not focusing on the bottom line revenue of a company. And that can only happen, and the presence of those will probably also drive a lot of our students into such environments where we can do more foundational work. I'd like to talk about one other major thing. This is kind of close to my heart as well. I am the CTO of the company. My company is actually run by my wife. She is the CEO. And you don't find too many women running companies. We are in the habit of throwing away half of our workforce pretty soon after they leave college. I believe India has one of the highest percentage of women engineers coming out of colleges, but they don't make it through. They have kids, they get married, they quit the workforce, and they don't make it back. The work environment is not conducive for women coming back into the workforce. I would encourage most companies to have a daycare or nanny facilities before they buy a foosball table. You would double the amount of available skilled labor overnight. This is really sad, especially given how hard we are all struggling to hire talent. We keep complaining that we don't have enough skilled labor, and we have just thrown away half of our labor force. That needs to change. So I'm not going to belabor that. I'll leave you guys to consider how that's going. Of course, leapfrog. Please focus on leapfrogging technology, not on copying and not on following paths set by other countries. You have to be building technology focused on the Indian condition, and who better to do that than the youth of India coming through the colleges in partnership with industry. Okay?
Thanks, Anand, for that lovely session. I'm sure the audience here would love to talk to you after this session. There is opportunity for each one of you because he needs skills. I think the colleges here can support him, I'm pretty sure.
I'm not the only one needing skills, we're all hiring.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've given me good ideas to see where I can collaborate with you as well.